If you could just take us, Professor Mermelstein, to the background and early years of Josephus.
Sure. So Josephus describes what we know about Josephus's life in greatest detail is what we gather from his work called Life of Josephus. At the beginning of Life of Josephus, Josephus basically tells the story of his life as follows. He says that he was born in the year 37 CE, right? It doesn't say 37 CE, but he's born in the year 37 CE to a prestigious family of Kohanim. He actually says that he is 1/8 Hasmonean. So I think he said 1/8 Hasmonean, which just points to how influential in the public consciousness the Hashmonaim continued to be long after they had actually ruled. He says that he was a child prodigy who was consulted by Jews on all areas of halacha, and that he measures his influence by an embassy that he was sent on by Jews in the year 63 CE. He says in the year 63 CE, when he's 26 years old, a number of Kohanim had been taken by Rome to be tried on charges that Josephus doesn't specify. But he says that the Jews dispatched a number of important leaders to try to advocate on behalf of these Kohanim in Rome. Josephus was one of this small embassy, which in Josephus's mind, and there's truth to it, that Josephus was a prominent person in Jewish society at that time. He doesn't say how long he was in Rome for, but he says that he returns to Judea on the eve of the revolt, probably in the year 66 CE. So it sounds like he was in Rome for a significant amount of time, which is important because it means that even before he arrives at Rome after the war, he's already become acquainted, become accustomed with some of the mores of the place. Perhaps he's already made social contacts. And he says that he arrives back on the eve of the revolt, and that's sort of his participation in the rebellion sort of gets started at that point when he's back at around the year, around the age of 30.
So he participates in the revolt. He is the governor of the Galilee. What was his record as the governor and as a military commander in the revolt?
Sure. So Josephus actually tells the story of his tenure as commander, as governor in the Galilee in two different places. They're not always consistent, but I'll try, just for the sake of simplicity, I'll try to synthesize them to the degree that I can. He says that in the year 66, there was still an open question about which way the Galilee would go. Would the Galilee join the rebellion, or would they not join the rebellion? Josephus says that there were also multiple factions within the Jerusalem council that was responsible for overseeing the rebellion. He identifies himself more with the peace camp that was hopeful that the Jews could still avert direct war with the Romans. And he says that he was dispatched by this kind of peace faction to go to the Galilee and try to get a lay of the land, try to figure out which people were thinking of participating in the rebellion, and trying to persuade them perhaps to lay down their arms, perhaps to take a wait-and-see approach, rather than committing themselves at that early date to full-scale revolt. It seems like he failed in that regard. He didn't manage to convince whichever rebels he encountered to lay down their arms. And he's subsequently appointed by the Jerusalem Council as governor and as general over the Galilee. Now, it's important to understand that even at this point, and this is now late in the year 66 CE, the Galilee is not necessarily aligned with the rebellion that has now broken out in Jerusalem. And that's going to make Josephus's task in the Galilee, basically bringing them under the umbrella of this revolt, trying to create a certain amount of unity. It's going to make his job very difficult. And that basically is the story that he tells. Basically, what Josephus says is he comes to the Galilee. He finds that there is infighting within any particular city. So any particular city, talks about Tiberias, talks about Sepphoris, talks about some of the other leading cities. There is infighting, multiple factions within each of these cities, some of which are more supportive of Rome, some of which are more supportive of revolt. And he has a hard time navigating those local politics. He also has a hard time navigating some of the rivalries, the regional rivalries between cities. So he discovers that some of the leading cities are actually vying for supremacy, right? Which city is going to become capital of this newly founded region? And so that's another complication that Josephus has trouble navigating. And he also has trouble navigating the attempts by some of the more, again, this is the way that Josephus tells it, by some of the more committed rebels who are resentful of Josephus, first of all, an outsider, second of all, perhaps he was more of a moderate, and so he faces challenges posed by these local rebel leaders. Some of the cities end up seceding to a certain extent. So, for example, Sepphoris, which is one of the cities that Josephus had to conquer and reconquer multiple times, Sepphoris ends up basically seceding from the rebellion and aligning themselves with the Romans. And so Josephus never had an easy time trying to bring the entire Galilee under the umbrella of the rebellion. What Josephus does say is that he succeeded in setting up sort of an administrative and judicial structure within these cities. And he also says that at one point there was an effort to recall him, basically to depose him as governor in the north by the Jerusalem Council. But basically, he says there was this accusation of mismanagement, which in light of what I've said is not unreasonable. He wasn't really successful. And Josephus says that it wasn't really motivated by mismanagement. In one of the accounts, he says it was motivated by jealousy. In another account, he says it was motivated by bribery. But what Josephus does say is that he was able to evade capture by this embassy of Jews coming from Jerusalem. This embassy of Jews coming from Jerusalem to depose him was also accompanied by 1,000 soldiers. Josephus talks about how he was able to evade capture. Eventually, he's able to talk his way out of it, which is one of the things. Josephus has incredible survival instincts. And he's able to talk his way out of this, and he's able to win reinstatement as governor and general in the north. His tenure as general ends in disgrace. Essentially, he's captured at Yotbata, and historians are divided as to how to take Josephus's account. Do we assume that Josephus was genuinely a moderate, was genuinely a member of this peace party who was trying as much as possible to try to avert disaster, perhaps to try to leave lines of communication with the Romans open, somebody who was trying only to wage a defensive war? That would be one way of reading it if we take Josephus's statement at face value. Other historians are more skeptical and say that actually Josephus probably is whitewashing history, and probably Josephus was a committed rebel at an earlier phase. And when Josephus talks about his role in some of his later writings, that's already at a point where Josephus has aligned himself with the Roman cause, and Josephus maybe is presenting a distorted picture of his actual role from the past.
Did he have a military background? Did he engage in actual warfare?
He didn't. There's no good reason for Josephus actually to have been appointed to this post. It could be that because of his diplomatic role in this embassy that I alluded to between 63 and 66. So perhaps there was a sense that if there's somebody that they need to send to the north, this is a difficult diplomatic situation, because there is this isn't a region that is necessarily under the control of Jerusalem. This is a region that to a certain extent is the Wild West. There isn't real unity. So perhaps there was a sense that Josephus could try to coax these people into joining the rebellion, could try to coax them into unity. It may be that that was more the motivation, because it's not clear that he had any real credentials that would have made him a successful general.